A couple years back, I released this video shown on screen detailing Lake Mead, America's deadliest national park, located just outside the city of Las Vegas in southern Nevada, along its shared border with Arizona. In that video, which essentially now serves as the part 1 of this video, although it's certainly not required to understand this video, I provided a brief history of the park and detailed why exactly Lake Mead has repeatedly proven to be the deadliest national park in America for years, covering the most commonly reported causes of death in the park, as well as several incidents pertaining to these different causes as an example. Finally, I concluded the video by examining the multiple sets of human remains discovered in the wake of record drought conditions and low water lines in 2022, including, of course, the infamous body in a barrel. As these discoveries at the time of my first Lake Mead video were still relatively fresh, I mentioned that I would release any further details uncovered in a potential follow-up video, and well, to be quite frank, there are essentially no new developments outside of what I covered in that video, and the 3 potential identities of the barrel body I covered in that video are still presently believed to be the most likely potential identities for the man. So, if you clicked on this video seeking to learn more about the barrel body or other victims uncovered by the drought in 2022, I suggest you check out that video for more detailed info, as I thoroughly examined each of these deaths in detail in that video and won't be covering them any further in this one. Now, those of you who have watched that first Lake Mead video may recall one incident within it that likely stood out amongst the others as particularly unusual, that incident being, of course, the David Noftser incident. So for this video, I decided that I'd once again comb through the park's records, this time in search of similarly unusual, unsettling, unhinged, or otherwise morbidly fascinating incidents throughout the years, and I certainly found more than a handful to choose from. So here are some of the most interesting morbid stories from America's deadliest national park. On the morning of March 8th, 2000, the campground host at Boulder Beach Campground would inform one of the campground's maintenance workers that she noticed that she hadn't seen any signs of activity from one of the occupied campsites for several days. The maintenance worker would head over to the campsite and called out for a response from the site's assumed occupant, but would receive no response in return from within the tent erected at the site. Thus, the worker would then subsequently open and peer into the interior of the tent, and promptly discovered the lifeless body of a 61-year-old man, as well as the clear cause of his death, the burnt-out remains of a charcoal fire. His cause of death was predictably ruled to be the result of carbon monoxide poisoning. On September 10th, 2000, a couple traveling along Burrow Wash Road would stumble across human remains in a wash nearby the road and immediately informed nearby Boulder City Police of their grim discovery. A police officer and park ranger would respond to their call, and following their arrival at the scene, subsequently discovered that the deceased 25-year-old man was actually a local fugitive who was wanted for attempted murder of his mother 5 days earlier on September 5th after he'd struck her repeatedly with his fists, the butt of a gun, and a toaster. Following an autopsy of his remains, officials would assert that he'd apparently perished after he'd wandered out into the desert completely unprepared and had ultimately succumbed to dehydration. On the scorching afternoon of July 21st, 2002, a family of 5 would rent a patio boat from Las Vegas Bay Marina for a Sunday of family fun on the water. While out on the lake, the father, a 48-year-old man, sought to teach his 18-year-old son how to swim, and so they located a quiet spot just south of Las Vegas Bay to conduct this swim lesson. While it seemingly went swimmingly at first. After a while, the 18-year-old would begin to struggle within the water and soon slip beneath the surface. His father would frantically dive into the water after him in an effort to save him. However, after a few minutes had passed, neither had resurfaced, prompting the remaining 3 members of the family to contact park officials, who immediately responded to the call and arrived within 15 minutes of receiving it with dive gear in tow. However, the ranger dive team would discover that the water at the location was 175 feet deep, and they were not equipped with mixed gas cylinders needed to safely descend to such depths, nor were the ranger divers comfortable with the prospect of conducting an underwater body retrieval in such deep water. Notably, as I've mentioned on the channel in the past, deep water body recovery operations are notoriously dangerous for those tasked with recovering the bodies, and thus the task of recovering the duo's bodies from the depths of the lake were outsourced to contracted professional deepwater divers who were aided by a State Bureau of Reclamation remotely operated vehicle over the course of August 13th and 14th, an arduous yet ultimately successful endeavor. Just under a year later, on the afternoon of June 25th, 2003, 2 hikers in Gold Strike Canyon would have an extremely unusual encounter while they were hiking along the trail when they came across a naked man swinging from a tree, shouting incoherently and sweating profusely, with his clothes piled up just beneath the tree he was swinging from. The 2 hikers were equally confused and disturbed by this encounter and decided to continue hiking along the trail. After they continued on for a short while, they came across yet another naked man. However, this man was laying face down on the trail and was completely unresponsive and lifeless upon closer inspection. The discovery of the second deceased naked man would cause the duo to reconsider their entire previous encounter with the other naked man swinging from the tree, and thus they decided to head back to try to help him. Upon returning to the tree, they would attempt to make contact with the man by calling out to him and waving their arms to catch his attention. However, he was seemingly oblivious to their attempts to do so, and so they decided to leave him a water bottle and headed off to get help. As they were making their way back to seek help, they'd come across another group of hikers heading in the opposite direction, and so they would explain the situation to the other hikers, who agreed to return the way they had come to get help, so that the duo that had come across the naked men could return to the man in the tree to help him, since they knew exactly where he was. They would return to the tree approximately 30 to 45 minutes after they'd last departed it. However, upon their return, they'd find the man's lifeless body laying at the foot of the tree. Park rangers would receive the call for help from the other group of hikers at around 3 p.m. and would arrive on scene approximately 45 minutes later. They would quickly ascertain that both men had clearly died as the result of heat overexposure and had likely been unprepared for the largely shadeless desert conditions and the unrelenting summer sun, as recorded temperatures in the park that day exceeded 110 degrees Fahrenheit at their peak. Now, as one might expect, Labor Day weekend, often considered the ceremonial last weekend of summer in the United States, is a popular time for many people to visit Lake Mead, and unfortunately it's a historically deadly and chaotic weekend for park officials to manage, which is perhaps best exemplified by the deadly events of Labor Day weekend of 2005. The first death of the weekend would take place on Saturday, September 3rd, 2005, when a 64-year-old man was swimming off the stern of a boat when he began to experience difficulties in the water. The other passengers of the boat would toss him one of the boat's bumpers, in an effort to give him something to cling to. However, he was unable to grab a hold of it and subsequently slipped beneath the surface of the water. The second death of the long holiday weekend would occur the following day on the morning of Sunday, September 4th, when a 30-year-old man would drown while attempting to swim across a small bay of water to reach a distant peninsula. The man was notably a poor swimmer and was not wearing a life jacket. Later that afternoon, a 14-year-old girl was riding in a tube being trailed by her family's boat when she was suddenly struck in the head by a jet ski traveling at approximately 40 miles per hour. The girl was instantly knocked unconscious by the blow and was scooped from the water by her family and was subsequently airlifted to the nearby University Medical Center. However, she would ultimately succumb to her injuries there. The operator of the jet ski was arrested for operating the watercraft while under the influence of alcohol and was booked in Laughlin. The final fatality of the weekend would occur later that very evening when a 45-year-old man who had consumed 18 beers climbed atop a cliff above the water and jumped off of it. Unfortunately, the man did not make a clean landing in the water and instead landed on the outdrive of a vessel, resulting in multiple deep propeller gashes on his arms, legs, and a particularly deep laceration across his femoral hip and groin area. Nearby quick-thinking onlookers would help remove the man from the water, and one person on scene would craft and apply a homemade tourniquet to the deep wound across his femoral hip and groin, fashioning the tourniquet out of a bungee cord and metal barbecue tongs. The man was then subsequently airlifted to University Medical Center for further treatment. However, unfortunately, he would ultimately succumb to his wounds later that evening at the hospital. Now, while the incidents I've covered in the video thus far have been entirely in order by date, for this section of the video, we're going to stray a little bit from this established precedent. In this portion of the video, I want to detail a few incidents at Lake Mead that weren't ultimately actually deadly. However, they certainly could have been under different circumstances. The first such incident I'd like to detail occurred on April 10th, 2007, when a woman visiting the park would discover what she described as an explosive device inside a cardboard tube while walking around the campground at Boulder Beach. The park officials, to whom the woman reported her discovery, would determine that the device was likely a live military ordnance, and thus the Las Vegas Bomb Squad and the Nellis Air Force Base Explosive Ordnance Disposal Unit were called to the scene to dispose of the device. From the Rangers report, quote, "They determined that the ordnance was an incendiary device capable of incinerating the person holding it and causing serious injury and or death to anyone nearby." Notably, the Rangers report didn't specify which type of incendiary this was, so I attempted to find a similar looking incendiary device to the woman's description. And now, well, I'm probably on some kind of watch list, but anyways, the closest I could find to the description given is the AN M14TH World War II incendiary grenade, although I'm pretty sure there are more modern iterations of grenades of a similar tube-style design, although these are typically smoke grenades if I'm not mistaken. However, I haven't served in the military myself, but I know that many of my subscribers have, so I'd love to hear what you all think this incendiary device likely was. Now, if you think that this is the only time that some poor soul has discovered an unexplained deadly explosive device within Lake Mead National Recreation Area, well, you'd be incorrect, as at around 2 p.m. on June 17th, 2015, park officials received a call about 3 suspicious-looking pipes in the water near Turkey Cove, south of Catherine's Landing, at Lake Mojave. Officials who responded to the call would determine that the 3 mysterious pipes were in fact pipe bombs, and the surrounding area was immediately closed off to the public as a result. The following day, on June 8th, the Kingman Police Department bomb squad would successfully disable the explosives using a bomb disruptor and subsequently successfully remove them from the lake. Now, the final nearly deadly incident I'll be detailing in this video is truly the epitome of nearly deadly, as on April 13th, 2015, the Lake Mead Communications Center would receive a 911 call from a man at Boulder Beach who reported that he'd witnessed another man punching and kicking his female companion after they'd exited their vehicle after arriving at the beach. Park officials would respond to the call immediately. Meanwhile, the man in question would continue to beat the woman until she fell unconscious. Park officials would arrive on scene to find the man holding the unconscious woman's head under the water of the lake, and they would immediately apprehend the man and rescue the woman from the water, thankfully still alive. The man was, of course, subsequently charged with attempted murder following his arrest. However, upon further inquiry, more disturbing details surrounding the incident would be uncovered, such as the discovery that the spat between the two had originally occurred after the man had dropped the woman's 2-week-old baby while he was intoxicated earlier that day. Now, to round out this video, I've got a few more unusual, interesting, and deadly incidents that I'll cover in just a moment. Although regrettably, many of the potential candidate incidents for this video I just couldn't squeeze into the script for this video, as if I were to cover all of the candidate incidents I marked in my notes for this video, the script would likely rival my 70-page behemoth of a script I wrote for my video about every deadly saltwater crocodile attack in Australia. So, if you've enjoyed this video so far, don't forget to leave a like and hype it, however one does that. I'm not entirely certain myself, but if you do know how, do that. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel as well, as more potential entries in this Lake Mead series of videos are definitely on the table, as it is America's deadliest national park after all, for a reason. Be sure to let me know what you think of this idea in the comments, as well as your thoughts on the incidents that I've covered in this video as well, as I love reading through the comments and seeing everyone's thoughts on the incidents that I cover. Okay, now that that's covered, let's get back to it then. On the evening of August 29th, 2009, a group of boaters were enjoying an afternoon on the water aboard a pontoon boat, which, for those of you that may be unfamiliar with them, are a type of boat consisting of 2 individual pontoons with a deck platform mounted atop of them. As the group of boaters aboard the pontoon boat were cruising along the lake at a leisurely pace of approximately 6 to 8 miles per hour, all the passengers aboard the craft, barring the captain driving it at the time, would decide to all stand at the bow of the boat all at once, which caused the frontmost portion of the pontoons to become momentarily fully submerged under the water, resulting in a surge of water flooding across the deck. Unfortunately, the surge of water would also knock one of the passengers, a 22-year-old woman, off balance, and she subsequently tumbled into the water near the bow, wedged between the 2 pontoons. Thus, as the boat continued to travel forwards, the woman was struck by the propeller of the engine, causing numerous severe and gruesome injuries that resulted in her death before she could even be pulled from the water by the rest of the mortified people aboard the pontoon boat. On September 30th, 2022, a juvenile and their family, hailing from nearby Las Vegas, would visit Kingman Wash Beach, located just upstream of the Hoover Dam. Unlike, well, just about every other story I've detailed in this video thus far, after spending the day swimming about in the water together at the beach, all members of the family would return home that evening with their lives intact and their visit seemingly gone by without any incident. Less than a month later, on October 19th, 2022, the aforementioned juvenile would tragically perish at a local Las Vegas hospital, with the Southern Nevada Health District confirming that they had perished as the result of Naegleria fowleri infection, otherwise known as the brain-eating amoeba, which is the same brain-eating amoeba responsible for another incident I covered in a video dedicated to the subject a few months back. So if you'd like to know more about the brain-eating amoeba and haven't seen it already, I highly suggest you check out that video after finishing this one. Notably, exposure to the amoeba during this visit to Lake Mead was seemingly their only possible exposure point to the organism, as well as the textbook span of time that had passed between first infection and the individual's death. Their death marks the only known case of Naegleria fowleri exposure stemming from Lake Mead as of the time of making this video. Thank you all for watching.